Hi bots! Today I'm going to talk about my Dark and Darker first impression from the most recent open beta in February 2023. So what is Dark and Darker? Dark and Darker is essentially a player versus environment battle royale set in a fantasy world. It has all your standard bells and whistles that you can expect from a BR game, like you have only one life, there is an out of bounds ring around the map that will gradually become smaller until the end of the game. There are multiple teams within a match, mixed with some escape from Tarkov mechanics and improved Skyrim-esque combat. And that is basically what Dark and Darker is in a nutshell. The goal of the game is to enter these blue portals to exit the arena with your loot. You will start the game with the gear that you entered with. Then you have to explore the dungeons, kill the mobs, and open chests to collect all the sweet loot. Also, remember that it's a PvPvE game, so you may encounter other players as well. Assuming they've been doing what you've been doing, they'll have some loot on them as well. Kill them too. Then pray to your god that a blue portal opens up as the thing is closing so you can exit with your loot. And that's it. That's the goal during the beta. That is most likely the general goal when the game is out. Get in, get stuff, get out. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Okay, now onto the gameplay. Overall, I really enjoyed the gameplay. I think it speaks volume of a game's gameplay if the game doesn't have any quests or checklists that I need to complete, no dailies, no weeklies, but it still managed to induce some level of unhealthy addiction to me and my friends. The melee combat, as I mentioned, is Skyrim-esque, right? So what this means is that it's mostly just left clicking. There's no additional combos that you need to do, unlike For Honor. Most of the time, you only have to press M1. But the melee combat feels very weighty and impactful. Somehow they managed to make it not complicated. But there are rewards for successful consecutive attacks, such as the follow-up swing, attacking faster, or dealing more damage. But most of the time, there's no crazy combo you have to remember. It's mostly just press M1 to deal damage. There are range classes in the game, and the range combat feels very fair. I really like the range combat here. The range damage is decent, and the drop off is incredibly punishing. And usually, range players will be punished by the mechanics within Dark and Darker for missed shots. So, if you're playing range, it doesn't mean it's an easy win every time because it does take quite a bit of skill to land your shots. The combat in general feels like it has a very low skill floor because there's no complicated combos you have to remember. Just left click and try to get a feel of how your weapon swings. But there is a rather tall skill ceiling. So this is very good because it's very easy to get your friends into the game, and you want to have friends in this game to play with you or make friends to play with you. Because soloing in Dark Darker is not as fun. At least a duo, at least have a +1. And the mechanics are compelling enough that there are reasons for you to continue playing and improve. So even though you might get a feel of the combat, it'll still take some time, I would say, for a typical person, typical gamer to be quote unquote god gamer. Additionally, one thing I really like about the game is how good the TTK feels. The time to kill in this game feels. Certain TTK feels very short, for certain classes like Rogue, whose main shtick is just to kill you as quickly as possible and then get out, or the Barbarian, who was admittedly very, very OP during the beta, and he can one-hit kill you. But outside of these two fringe cases, most class has a very good TTK. It feels like even if your team gets ambushed, if you can outmaneuver and outplay the team, you can generally win even though the enemy gets the first hit. Unlike Tarkov, where if you get jumped on, you normally just die instantly. In Dark and Darker, if you have the skills, you can generally outmaneuver an ambush. What sets Dark and Darker apart from all this like lose all your gear battle royale like Daisy, Escape from Tarkov, is that in Dark and Darker, the default gear that you start off, you can still put up a good fight. So even when you die during a run in D&D and you lose all the gear that you gain throughout that run, at the very minimum, the decent gear that you have to start off with is good. The default gear is good. I feel that this mechanic greatly alleviates the gear fear that normally comes from this type of games. Makes you feel less bad when you die during a run because you have the default gear. So I think this is a star feature in Dark and Darker. and something that I believe Tarkov light game can take note and include it as a feature, as it makes the game a lot more fun for a lot more people. At least when you have a newbie joining you, you don't feel so bad dying, because when you play Tarkov, for example, even the bare minimum gear takes time to grind. But in Dark and Darker, you die, you requeue. You die, you requeue. So you can keep playing the game. So I like this feature a lot. It makes the game a lot more accessible for newer players, and they do not have to grind just to get decent gear. So welcoming new players or friends into Dark and Darker is a lot easier, because the punishment for death or losses is a lot lighter. So before we forget, remember that Dark and Darker is a PvP VE game. So there is that PvE element still that we haven't touched about. I just want to say it briefly. I think the PvE element in Dark and Darker is difficult, but it's not unfair. Most mobs put up a good fight, and they also serve as great practice to prepare for greater skilled foes, other players. Because let's be honest here, if a player cannot get through the standard PvE mob in Dark and Darker, that's a play that you will never meet anyway. Most of the mobs have a very readable skill set of moves. Even if you get hit, it feels bad because you lose quite a bit of HP, but it doesn't pull you totally out of the game. So it's difficult but fair. Unfortunately, I also cannot comment on the bosses, because although we encounter some, we never actually grinded far enough to be able to give the boss a good fight. But we did visit Hell, which is the one level lower than the level that you start on, and that was a good set of challenge as well. We had some successful Hell runs, and this were fun. Now we talk about the game progression. So I really can't comment on the game progression because, well, it was just an open beta. The skill tree was still in development, but perks were available. There were perks for each classes, but I feel like this is one of the game's weaker points, unfortunately. Perks were very limited, and at the same time, it feels incredibly shallow. Most perks is stuff like your next shot deals 10% damage. You can smack trees harder, you hit harder, you move faster, you heal. That's about it. It feels kind of shallow. The current implementation feels like it's tacked on as a last minute addition to just add more depth to the gameplay. Of course, I didn't mind it at all because this is an open beta, and I think this is an area that they can expand upon. Now, let's talk about the one gameplay mechanic that every single Battle Royale player has a love-hate relationship with: third parties. Fortunately, for people who absolutely hate third parties, or unfortunate for people who love to third party feels like a very rare occurrence in Dark and Darker. I think partly because I feel like the map is pretty big, and there's barely any quick rotation mechanics in the game, unlike Apex who have like balloons. The sidelines in Dark and Darker is very short. The map is very maze-like. So unlike in Tarkov, where there's a lot of long sidelines to spot other players, Dark and Darker, the sidelines is very short. So what generally happens is that people move quite slow, and teams spend a lot more time looting and fighting the PvE mobs than they do third party. Funnily enough, I find that in Dark and Darker, more often than not, you will be third partied by wandering mobs instead of other players. Whether that's by design or by accident, it's kind of hard to get third party in D&D. In conclusion, I think Dark and Darker is off to a great start. I really love the beta. The February beta has definitely displayed that Dark and Darker has very tight gameplay. The PvE difficulty feels about right. Mob feels good, and it feels rewarding to fight with them. Having a default set of gear greatly alleviates gear fear, and it makes welcoming new players easy as well. So that's good for the long-term health of the game. During the open beta, the game feels like it's about 60% done. I feel like during the beta, they focus a lot of things on the gameplay mechanics and the balance changes. And I feel that the other 40% that is still missing within the game is questing or objectives to kind of give more purpose for the gameplay loop. But overall, I am very excited to see where the developers take the game. I think it's quite clear cut based on the popularity of Dark and Darker in Twitch. The February open beta was definitely very successful, and a lot of people are kind of sold on what the game is trying to sell. And I am definitely putting this one on the wish list for 2023. and I hope they keep heading in this right direction. It feels good. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you wish to see more, drop a like and subscribe so you can be notified whenever I put up a new video, and comment on what you agree or disagree with my first impression, and whether you are excited for the next Dark and Darker beta. If you ever want to catch me live, I am live every weekday at twitch.tv/10axis. Other than that, chat, have a nice day.